Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, a part of our series, Advice and Perspectives from Friends of UConn, where UConn Center for Career Development brings guests to you to talk about the career journey in these tumultuous times. The series includes a mix of alums and experts on starting, restarting, and surviving career-wise in this economy. My name is Lisa McGuire, and I'm with the UConn Center for Career Development. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. You should see your attendee interface on your computer desktop in the upper right-hand corner. You're listening in using your computer speaker system by default. If you'd prefer to join over the phone, just select telephone in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed. Today's webinar is designed to be interactive with a Q&A format. I will ask John some prepared questions, but the value of this session is to have your questions answered. Please submit them to us by typing into the questions pane of the control panel. We encourage you to send them in at any time during the presentation, and we'll address them throughout. Note that today's event is also being recorded and will be provided to you within 48 hours. With that out of the way, let's get to the reason we're all here. Please let me introduce our guest, John Sponauer. John is currently Vice President of Marketing, Communications, and Philanthropic Giving at the Wheeler Clinic. He previously worked for the UConn Foundation and at Athena Health, also in communications. John's a double UConn grad with degrees in journalism and political science, as well as an MBA. I'm not sure how many bleed bluer than John. And before we get started, I want to thank you, John, for writing such a poignant and uplifting blog post for us in March. Folks joining us, if you haven't read it already, I highly encourage reading it, but we'll talk about it more today. So welcome, John. We're so glad you can join us today. My conversation with you today is going to be a little bit different from some of our Thursdays in the past. While we can certainly talk about surviving the job market through a downturn in the economy, I'd like to focus more on ways our alums can lean on us alums for support and guidance. You've started the conversation with your blog where you point out that new graduates and alums who may be unemployed can and should mourn the loss of their final semester and previous job, but then use this as an opportunity. In fact, you say, and I really like this, I'm privileged to have been able to fail, and I've learned that failure creates opportunity just as need does. Will you share a little bit more about how to pick yourself up and use this to grow and pursue a meaningful career?
Sure. Well, first of all, Lisa, thanks so much for having me, and thanks everyone for joining in the webinar. I really appreciate it. The blog post was an honor to write because I felt like I wanted to do something. And when I got the email and I had people saying, well, you were looking for ideas from alumni about what they could say to the class of 2020. I'm a writer, basically, and I wanted to take the opportunity to let everyone know that there is hope here. It's a terrible situation, and we do have to mourn those losses. We have to mourn the loss of graduations and proms and spring semesters on a beautiful campus like Storrs. I mean, those are special times in your life, and those are taken away very quickly, and we should mourn those things. But just as important as mourning them, we need to move forward, right? And we need to learn from these losses and learn from these disappointments and learn in life really from our failings. And it's sort of all wrapped up together, and that was really what kind of came together in the blog post as I was writing it. So just a word about privilege, because you mentioned it, and I think it's necessary to point out the privilege. So first, cards on the table. I outlined in the blog post many ways that I'd failed in life, and many ways that I'd fallen, and many ways that I'd continued on, and maybe a different way than I originally was thinking. But I think that privilege is the right word that I use, because I always had that social and structural support to lift me and guide me forward, and not everyone does have that. And I want to recognize that. And I didn't have to swim against the current that perhaps my Black colleagues did, that perhaps other populations of color have to do, that women have to do, the LGBTQIA community has to do. I didn't have to swim even across the current. I had a lot of structural things helping me along. It's easier to get to home plate when you start on second base to a degree. And so I want to recognize that and acknowledge that. And when we talk about resilience, Lisa, when you and I were emailing, I thought about the word resilience. And am I resilient? I don't know. I think of resilience meaning, my friend with stage 4 breast cancer. I think about those things. But what I do think I am is flexible. And I think flexibility is key to success in life. everything that you fail in, you get a chance to learn from. And the more flexible you are, the easier I think that learning process is. So does that make sense? Does that answer that sort of the part of where some of the core of my argument was going?
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit more about that. Let's explore that flexibility as it
Yeah,
relates to what students are facing today, right? So
right.
you shifted your career and academic goals numerous times, as
Mhm.
you articulated in the post. But some of our viewers probably didn't read it, so we can go back and you
Yeah,
can sort of explain that so that it's not this
sure.
mystery out there. But also, so how did that benefit you? How did having those different experiences and being forced to be flexible, because the flexibility wasn't necessarily your choice, right?
No,
And maybe
no.
it was the flexibility that you had to have was forced by your choices, whether they be good or bad. And then there were
Yeah,
things that you couldn't control. So maybe,
right.
that can, as it relates to today's group of viewers and society at large, especially the class of 2020, maybe we can make sort of some parallels there.
Sure. Yeah. So some background for me. It's in the blog to a degree, but I think it's worth delving into. I don't think I was an especially flexible person um, until I got to UConn to a degree. I entered UConn as an engineering major. My father was an engineer, and I wanted to go in engineering. And I discovered after my first semester with a 1.3 GPA that perhaps engineering wasn't for me. Numbers perhaps were not my friend, and I was really lost. I mean, I'd never failed at anything. I had graduated near the top of my high school class. Academics were always relatively easy for me. And then suddenly I'm getting Fs and I'm getting Ds and I'm looking at a 1.3 going, how is this even possible? And it really prompted me to assume that what I thought was the path wasn't necessarily the path, right? And so I explored things a lot. I changed majors so many times, tried accounting, economics, and I was bouncing around, and never found where I really could hang my hat, really never found what my passion was. And then I actually kind of thought back to a high school teacher of mine who said that I was a decent writer. And so I looked at journalism, and I really got hooked by it. And I thought, I'm going to be the reporter. This is 1989, 1990. I'm going to be the reporter who's going to cover the war. I'm going to be the reporter who's going to globetrot around the world. I'm going to be the reporter who's going to report on what's going on in the Soviet Union. And so I double majored in political science. This is exciting. I want to be this global reporter, and I'm going to be able to cover these amazing events. And then the Soviet Union collapsed in 89, 90. Literally, I was taking a Soviet political theory class when the wall came down, and the professor came in, and actually not when the wall came down, I think when communism collapsed, when the Soviet Union disbanded. And the professor came in with our huge book, which was like $150 or something at the time, and literally walked over and threw it in the trash and said, from now on, we're going to read the New York Times for our textbook. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. Again, my path isn't what I thought it was going to be. But
Talk about flexibility. That
yeah,
professor had to have some there, right?
totally, right, absolutely. And I think he even said, if you want to go to the co-op, I'll try to give you credit on the book because it really isn't valid anymore. And so, I never became that reporter. I never got to study the Soviet Union. I never, journalism itself, I wanted to be a reporter, and journalism itself in the early 90s was transforming. And we see this continuation of journalism sort of moving to totally different models than what I learned. The internet essentially didn't exist. So everything I learned, I'm not saying it was useless. It was not useless at all. I learned to write, which was a gift for me in life. But nothing was as I planned, and I graduated kind of aimless, kind of like, okay, well, Soviet Union's gone. I'm not sure I can, be a reporter, and the whole model is changing. And but that writing, that core, and mentors in the journalism department really kept me inspired to write and write and write. And I ended up going into public relations and marketing, and writing has helped me in every single job I've ever had. So that's the undergrad part. And then for the grad part, I was out of UConn's system for, I don't know, 15 years, I guess. And I went back for my MBA, thought this would be great. I'm, somewhat experienced in my career now. I've got a couple years under my belt. I know what I'm doing. I go back and I get an MBA, and I'm literally in a finance class in 2008 when the stock market is going down 500 points up, 700 points the next day. I'm watching this spasm going on around me, and I graduate with an MBA just as really the business community exploded and the Great Recession happened. I thought, can I possibly be this unlucky? But it's not unlucky. It's luck, because the MBA opened doors. The journalism degree taught me how to write. The political science degree taught me how to look at things from different perspectives. And yeah, I never became that reporter. And yeah, I didn't, make millions on Wall Street. And yeah, I didn't go study the world. But all those things taught me flexibility and taught me how to use assets I have for other things.
That's good, and the ability to shift. So you mentioned earlier when you were talking a little bit about privilege and sort of setting the table here,
Yeah.
but you said you had a support network, right? And maybe others don't, but you mentioned your support network. Now, along those lines, how did that support network help you when you were making these shifts? Were they disciplined? Like your dad was an engineer and you started out as an engineer. How did you break that news to him? I'm not doing so well in engineering. I think I'm going to shift to journalism, which probably in your dad's eyes, knowing engineering and engineering folks as I do, having lots of family members who are that, didn't go over particularly well. How did that go? And then, how did you use that and your other support network to help yourself shift and be flexible? Did you
Yeah.
have mentors maybe?
Yeah, I had a lot of mentors along the way. But so first, my dad. My dad was an engineer to his core. That was the soul of who he was, and I remember very clearly, actually, when I think it was my fourth major change, when I said, I'm going to be journalism, Dad, and he said, okay. And my mom, I remember saying, well, what can you do with journalism? And I said, well, you could be a reporter, or you could go into public relations. And I remember my mom saying, what's public relations? And my dad, engineer, said, well, they relate to the public. Well, okay, yeah, yes, that's true. They were very supportive of me leaving engineering, put it that way. The 1.3 didn't really convince anyone that this was a great investment in education. I was also the first generation in my family to go to college the traditional way. My dad he got his bachelor's at night over many years and worked very, very hard, was laid off quite a bit, and really struggled to put me through college. And so I felt terrible because I felt like I had failed, and I'm supposed to be an engineer, right? This is the plan, to become an engineer. But that just wasn't the case. They were supportive of me succeeding. They were supportive of me trying to find something that I was good at, and I ended up being good at it. And I don't know if he ever totally understood what I do, but he always supported me in that. And I think I just have structural and systemic supports too. I've certainly actual specific mentors in my life. John Breen in the journalism department scared me to death. He was probably the most inspirational and influential professor in my life. He taught me the value of the small details. You would lose a letter grade for every typo and what you turned in. And I was terrified of that. And to this day, the typos are the bane of my existence. And that's something that goes back to John Breen in Arjona Hall in 1990. I mean, I'm 50 years old. I shouldn't fear typos as much as I do, but it's because of John Breen, really. And it's interesting because one of your previous guests had mentioned John Breen at all. Matt Nucci had mentioned John Breen. But John taught me a lot of things about writing, about critical thought, which I think goes into flexibility. On the first day of journalism 101 with John Breen, he basically says, check your sources, check your sources, check your sources. If your mother says she loves you, check your sources. And I'm like, excuse me? But that ability to think critically of what you learn and what you hear, I mean, can you think of a better lesson for these times, to think critically about the information that you're getting? So he was a mentor, certainly. Someone who hired me relatively early in my career and had no right to hire me because I wasn't really qualified to do what he hired me for, was a lifelong mentor. And he taught me the value of flexibility, the value of standing for a goal, the value of standing by your principles. If you can at all, do it. And he taught me love of community. I lost him a couple years ago, shortly after I lost my dad. And it was like a 1-2 punch in a lot of ways, because I think those two men really shaped me more than anyone. I've had amazing bosses. I had some amazing bosses when I worked at UConn Foundation. Deb Cunningham at the UConn Foundation really inspired me and taught me a lot about how to work a team forward and how to seek a vision. And I've been very lucky to have these mentors and to, I guess, sort of stumble onto them and then maintain the relationship. And I think the mentors, I think that's what I want to do here today to a degree, and what I wanted to do a little bit with the blog post is offer myself up. And I think other alums should offer themselves up. I think it's vital to be a mentor to the next generation, because no one is a self-made success. Everybody had systemic or structural or individual support to get where they are. And I think it's an obligation, really, to be a mentor, to answer that email that someone writes and say, hey, I could use your help, could you help me? I think it's one of the most personal things you can do, other than philanthropy, probably, in religion, is to take the time out of your day to help someone succeed in life. So, here we are. I'm happy to. And I was actually very moved by one particular UConn student. We meet every Thursday night now to go over things and go over careers and resumes. And she wrote me this amazing note after that blog post. I won't embarrass her by saying who she is, but she sent me like a perfect note that basically said, I read your blog post. I've changed majors a bunch of times. I think I made a bunch of mistakes by doing it. Can you give me some advice? Could you look at my resume? Could you? And now we're in a multi-week engagement where every Thursday night we meet and go over resume and go over career and go over what I do and maybe her career aspirations. So you got to pay it forward. If you're not paying it forward, what are you here for? I mean, we have this alumni base of 250,000 people. There's probably no brand in Connecticut as strong as the University of Connecticut. And we, when we pay for an education, we pay in part for that network and use it. And people who are in that network and have benefited from it, share your knowledge.
So how does one become a mentor, or how, people could have the best intentions or whatever, and say, okay, I want to be a mentor. How does one start? Or the reverse. I really, well, we could be saying, I don't need a mentor. Tell us why you do. Everybody does, right? And then how do I go about finding a mentor? Is it somebody I work with? Is it, I know it's all of the above, but give us some pointers on, this young woman you just referenced, and you said she wrote the perfect message. Why? What made that perfect? What made that resonate with you and want to jump in to be a mentor, other than the fact that it sort of seems like it might be partly in your DNA? So it's not in somebody's DNA. How did they get over that?
Well, I would hope that if it's not in your DNA to be a mentor, you think about where you came from and how you got to where you are, and who helped you along that way. Was it family? Was it friends? Was it coworkers? Was what? And can you pay it for it? Because I got to tell you, it's very rewarding. And how she did it was really perfect, because it wasn't. I go to a fair number of UConn alumni events, and the shake your hands and the introductions, and those are all wonderful and great, and I've met fantastic people there. But very often the lead question is, do you have an internship? Do you have an internship you could offer me? Do you have a job that's open? Honestly, I don't. If I did have an internship, it would be one internship, and I just don't have something. So if you lead with, what can you do for me, versus the conversational, how can we, both exchange knowledge and passion and excitement for this, I think it's like any other relationship. It's like your marriage. It's like your relationship with your friends. It's like your relationship with your coworkers. It's not a one-way thing. I mean, I think I taught my mentors, I hope I taught my mentors things that they didn't know, and they certainly taught me many things that I didn't know. So it's like starting a relationship with anybody. It can't just be a one-way path, one-way street. And the one that I've talked about, she's fantastic. I mean, she makes me think of things in different ways. She asks amazingly pointed questions. Kudos to the UConn communications department and their advertising, because we're going over ad campaigns and marketing, and she's saying, oh yeah, that thing you talked to me about, I did that in one of my classes, a year ago. Okay, and she knows it, like flat out knows it. It took me 20 years to know that, so I think you do learn quite a bit.
So I think what I'm hearing is, first of all, Huskies helping Huskies, right?
Totally.
So, and I personally, as an alum, I don't know any alum who's ever said no, right? If somebody says, hey, I see that you had this experience. I'm a UConn student or I'm a UConn grad. Would you be willing to talk to me about that? Right. So
Sure.
it's an open-ended question, right? But it's more about being probative, right? Being, inquisitive about somebody's life story. Who doesn't like talking about themselves,
Well, that's
right? Let's
exactly
face
it,
it.
right? Right, exactly. That's exactly it. And I think that I've given that advice a few times is when you don't know what to say, ask the person, what's your biggest challenge at your job? Not what do you do, because that's a very, okay, well, I'm vice president of marketing communications, so I would give that, what's your biggest challenge? Or what do you think you've learned the most in your job? And start the conversation and be sincere about it. And the reason you're asking those questions is to listen, right? Is to learn from your mentors. And I think just approaching it in a very human, conversational way is always going to be the right way to do it, no matter what the circumstances.
And I think that is what we can talk about that'll serve our students and recent grads well, right? Is that's what they could be doing today.
Mhm.
Maybe not, I mean, certainly could be searching for a mentor, but maybe not label it as such. Maybe you're just reaching out for information to fellow
Mhm.
alums. And how do they do that? I mean, you've offered generously, which is great. Matt Netchie has offered a lot of well, every single one of our Thursday series folks has offered. Um, uh, how else? So say you weren't on this. What else? Where else could someone find this mysterious mentor?
Sure. Well, I mean, the Husky Alumni Network is a great place to start. The university has a system already set up to match people with interests, and I'm on there. There's thousands of people on there, and it's a good way to find people who are near you, people who have commonalities to you, or who have connections that you may be able to use. Something like LinkedIn, I think, is good. I'm always leery about LinkedIn as a step one, because very often you get an invite and like, what is the context here? They have some commonalities, but why do you want to connect with me? So I think that if you're going to start with a LinkedIn approach, great, but provide context in that invitation. Like, why do we want to connect besides just the fact that we're both Huskies? That's fantastic, and you know, go Huskies. But what's the reason you're reaching out to me? I think the Husky Alumni Network probably would be a good, the mentor network, I think, would be a good way to start looking, because you're going to be able to match to specific questions, and it's very granular. Someone can put down, I'm willing to look at resumes, or I'm only free on Tuesdays from 5 to 7 to talk, but I'm happy to talk. And I think it's an incredible asset. Again, it's kind of what you're paying for when you pay to go to a school. And UConn has a great one, and has an amazing alumni network. Those are two immediate ones that I can think of.
Sure. And then you can use your LinkedIn network, right? You can,
Absolutely.
having a good LinkedIn profile, we promote that pretty much
Yep.
every week. Because people who in certain fields, I mean, some fields don't use LinkedIn, other
Mm.
fields do.
Yeah.
But you can always look under, UConn alumni and really get a feel for what our alums are doing, where they're working, how they can help. And you can reach out to them and say, hey, I see that you are a XYZ major, so am I. I see that you're also working at XYZ company.
Totally.
Tell me how did you get there? What's your journey been, kind of
Yep.
thing.
Yep. And I think that the alumni network in general will be sympathetic to students, especially who are graduating right now. I think everyone is just dealing with this shock still, even though it's been 3 months. Everyone's still dealing with this shock. And I know for myself, I'm absolutely going to be sympathetic for anyone who graduates right now, trying to figure out where they can find their way into the job market, and where can they look, and what can they do, and is their resume good enough? Where do they compete? And it's tough out there. I mean, it's tough. I have a friend who just posted an entry-level job, 1 to 3 years experience, and texted me this morning that getting candidates that have 25 to 30 years of experience applying for this. Oh, so someone who graduates in the class of 2020, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but it's tough out there, and use every asset you have. But I do think the fact you're graduating now provides opportunity. And I know it's terrible right now. It's awful. Everyone can feel it. It's such an awful time. But I think it provides opportunity. I really, truly do.
So what should that, I just want to answer the question that's out there. How do you find the Husky alumni, the network? And that's on the career.uconn.edu website. You can find Husky Mentor Network. So please, I encourage you to do that. But moving back to what can people do now? So we all know, just like you said, it's in the news, it's everywhere. People have experienced it firsthand. There are hiring freezes everywhere. Who's hiring? I don't know. Dunkin' Donuts is hiring 5,000 people, and some of the retailers are. But if that's not there's nothing wrong with working at Dunkin' Donuts, but if that's not my career goal, what can I be doing now? I can be looking for an alum or a mentor, but for what goal? To what goal? What should I, I'm not going to ask them for a job because there's a hiring. I see that they work at somewhere. I've seen in the paper there's a hiring freeze. So what am I going to do? What am I going to do with this? How do I do this? What do I do? Where do I start?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's a conversation, and it's going to be about bettering your understanding of the opportunity that's out there, the potential that you have in yourself, where your assets are. Maybe that mentor can identify things that you don't see in yourself. My biggest mentor, the one I mentioned that hired me very young, saw something in me that I didn't see myself. And I think it was because we had so many conversations about the work that we did together. And so maybe it's not today, okay? Maybe you're not setting up for a job right now in June of 2020. But if you're establishing yourself as someone who has a head on their shoulders, that's reliable, that can think ahead and has excitement, has passion, and has that skills and knowledge, you're building a foundation, I think, for the future. Because when things get better, and they will, I promise, you're going to be ahead of the person who basically sat back and watched Netflix all day long. I mean, nothing against Netflix, but if you're trying to improve yourself, if you're maybe showing the mentor or someone a resume saying, where's my weak spot? Like, where's my blind spot in this? The student I talked about realized that she didn't know enough about search engine optimization and marketing. And we talked about it a little bit. She's taking, not because of me specifically, but she was already thinking about this, but she's taking a Google class in search engine optimization. It's a weak spot for her. And I think that she just went through 4 years of undergrad. So, she's more than looking forward to getting out of the classroom. But this is a blind spot, a weak spot in her resume, and I'm suggesting to her, and other people have suggested to her, that, hey, pick up the skill now, and you'll be ahead of the game when things come back, because they will come back. And I do continue to think there's going to be opportunity out there for the class of 2020 that we can't see, that they can't see right now, in ways that we can't identify. We can see this from the past. We can see the successful companies, and forget, this is just talking about companies. Microsoft started in a horrible economic condition. Uber and Airbnb. They started out of the Great Recession. Where there's failure and where there's burning of structures and systems, there's opportunity that grows out of that. And like a phoenix, I am guaranteeing you that the class of 2020 will have those opportunities. I don't know what they're going to be, because they're in the future, but there's going to be shifts out of the times we're in right now, and the class of 2020, I think, is positioned for them very well. They're more connected than any other generation that has come before them, and I think human connection, if we need any more evidence that we're all connected, look around us right now. So they naturally get connection, they naturally have passion, they naturally have knowledge, and they have us, and we're going to be standing for them. And I'm optimistic. I know it's easy for me to say, like I said early on, the privilege. It's very easy for me to sit here and say everything's going to be okay, but everything's going to be okay. Not maybe in June, maybe not in July, but things will get better. Things will get better. And failure and disappointment is, if you can master failure and disappointment, you're going to master life, because it's a key part of life.
Absolutely right. So if anybody has any other questions, please put them in now, because I don't want to take too much more of John's time, but I think what your point is, and you've made some really good points, but to not to use this as an opportunity. Um, don't watch Netflix all day or binge watch anything. But use it, as you said, take an SEO course, take a course on something. Maybe you don't know where that gap might be. So talk to friends, build up that network, keep in touch with people. Look, reach out to people. Why? Because you're building up these relationships. Keep them up, right? Support each other, and it will get better.
It will. And building internal flexibility is going to help you. Whether you graduated into economic boom or economic bust, building a mental flexibility is going to serve you in life. Challenge your assumptions, find opportunities in things that other people don't see. Be mindful of what you're thinking, and is there a different way of thinking about it? Whether it's a political issue or your project or your skill set. What am I missing in this? Like, can I approach this from a different angle? And is there an opportunity in that different angle? For me, there was no, I couldn't be a journalist. Well, what else can I do with writing? Well, I can write marketing. I can do public relations. Well, Soviet Union collapse. What else can I learn from this? Well, I can learn about analysis. I can learn to understand there's different viewpoints and things. And those were skills that I didn't really learn in the classroom for that purpose, but they served me. And trying to be as flexible as you can. I'm a biased person towards specialists versus generalists. I'd much rather have generalists than specialists, because I think that no plan survives first contact with anything. And I think that having the generalist and the flexibility mindset is going to be what lets you succeed and see opportunity out of things where there's no opportunity in the mind of anyone else.
And I think those conversations that we're talking about will also help you see that opportunity if maybe you don't see it for yourself. And it doesn't have to be as pointed as, where do you see a gap in my career? It's more a joint kind of evaluation or aha moment, where it's just having those people to talk to, maybe somebody with a different experience in your life, sort of expand your network, right? And stay in touch, so that you have those opportunities for aha moments.
Yeah, absolutely. And my mentors floated in and out of my life multiple times as I grew, and as my career changed and took all these turns. And sometimes not when I expected it to. I would say, wait a minute, that person knows someone, and is there a way that I can get a connection there? Because I think it's a really good match. And it turns out my mentor knew them. They worked together. Or I would bounce an idea off of this one particular mentor, and he would say, "That's a stupid idea. Don't do that." And if he said it was a stupid idea, I wouldn't necessarily not do it, but I would think about, why is he saying this is a bad idea? And he was only wrong once. He was only wrong once. He was usually right, but it was good to have that ego check, because I knew I could throw something out to him, and he could say, "Yeah, no, that's not what you should be doing right now." He's usually right.
Well, and it's nice to have someone that is going to be honest with you, right? And you should be honest with someone else, and platitudes is probably not that helpful in general.
Sure.
But being honest. We did have somebody ask, how do you switch majors? So let's look at a student who maybe is somebody who's still a student without feeling like a quitter, right? So maybe you're grappling internally with, oh my God, I'm failing. It's my fault. I didn't put in the effort, or I didn't do whatever. But how do you not feel like you're a quitter, or should you persevere? How do you balance that internally?
Yeah. So I had a really interesting meeting with a UConn business student 2 years ago. It was a series of one-on-one conversations we were having, and she came in and she said, I have to ask you a question because I saw that you changed majors a bunch of times and you weren't a business major as an undergrad. I said, that's right. She goes, I don't belong in finance. I really don't. I'm like, well, why are you in finance? Well, because my dad's in finance. Well, okay. Let's have this conversation here, So how do you not feel like a quitter? Well, I always tell UConn students when I'm meeting with them, make a Venn diagram, right? And the Venn diagram is, one of them is your passion. Like, what do you think you're passionate about? And the second one is your skills. What have you learned? You know? And the third one is the opportunities that you think might be out there or that are in front of you, and try to make those circles, like a Venn diagram, overlap. And ideally, you want that middle. You want all three. I'm lucky enough right now, I have a position that is exactly all three. It's an amazing opportunity to lead an amazing organization in marketing, and it's a passion of mine, and it's a skill of mine. Well, you're not always going to have that. So find those things that are maybe two of those things. So you're not a failure, okay? You change your mind. I mean, if anything, it's a sign of maturity and intelligence that you're able to change something so significant as your major or what you want to do. So look for opportunity, look for your skills, look for those passions. And if you can't find all three, because most people don't, find two of the three, right? And work from there. And you're 21. You have a lifetime ahead of you, and keep working on those matches of two, and that's going to shift because your passions are going to change until you finally get to that center. And maybe you never do. Maybe it's a constant shift, and that's okay too. But you're not a loser. You're not someone who has failed. You're someone who has intelligently reevaluated what's important to them.
So to follow up on that, we do have somebody who wants to pursue that a little bit more, and said, when you're looked down upon because of your struggles and your grades, how do you look above it and still reach out for help? So it's that point where you have to kind of admit that you need help. So how do you reach that point and grapple yourself with, I need help?
It's a good question. So just bringing it back to my first semester experience, I'd never failed at anything academically in my life, ever. And to have a 1.3 my first semester was a shock. Everyone always asks, well, was it because you were having such a great time? No, turns out it wasn't. Turns out it was because I just wasn't good at engineering, and I had to check my ego quite a bit and say, okay, this isn't it. Now what do I do? And look, we aren't all meant to be engineers. You should thank your lucky stars that I don't design the airplanes that you fly in. All right. And no offense to our engineer friends, but most of the great poems and great pieces of literature in our society that have enriched us all weren't written by engineers. Not to say that there can't be crossover in that, but you are very special. You're individual, you're very special. You have amazing assets and amazing skills and amazing knowledge. You may not know what they are yet. It may take you your lifetime to figure them out. It's that skill and passion part of that Venn diagram I talked about, but you'll find them. You're going to find them. And maybe not where you thought, maybe not where you'd mapped out. But if you are introspective, and if you think about what gets you up in the morning, what gets you excited, you're gonna find your way toward those passions and hopefully those skills, and then hopefully matching it up with the opportunities. I don't know if that's a really good answer to that question, but I think that students today tend to be very outcomes focused, and I think that's great. All right, they're very driven. Here's the clubs I'm in. Here's the GPA I have. Here's this and here's that. And that's fantastic. Awesome. Rock on. You're amazing. You're amazing. But you have to understand, I think, that, and I think this spring has been a good lesson for us all, that life is going to smack you in the face occasionally. And that plan isn't going to be what you thought it was going to be. And checking your ego in that, and that's probably not the right way of saying it, but understanding that plans don't really always survive the first contact with a problem is going to be a good skill for us, because you're going to fail in life. You're going to fail all the time in life. You're going to aim and miss things. You're going to have your heart broken. You're going to break someone's heart. You're going to let other people down. You're not going to live up to your own standards. And learning how to pick yourself up and dust yourself off and learn why did I get knocked down by that? Why did I do that? Help yourself up and help the person you may be hurt up. Failure is part of life, and the earlier you learn that, I think the more you can succeed from it. And failure is not a bad thing. You can't grow without failure. All right, you can't learn without failure. You can't succeed without failure. What do you measure success against if you've never failed? If you've never failed, you've never tried anything. All right, so failure is a sign that, to me, that you you tried to do something. It's funny, I wasn't intending to mention it, but I have this little newspaper clip on my monitor. It's actually from the Daily Campus, believe it or not. It's when I worked at UConn, and I love it because it's not morbid. That's probably not the right word, but I have it. It says, it's from a headline. It says "Doomed but not quite yet," and I love it because I always feel like life is that sort of that fine line between triumph and disaster. The Kipling poem, "If," you meet with triumph and disaster, and treat those two imposters just the same. It's a yin and a yang thing, and yeah, we're all doomed, but not quite yet. And you got tomorrow. The past is your lesson, right? You learn from what you went through. The past is your lesson. The gift, though, is today. Today is the gift because not everyone's got today, right? And then the future, tomorrow, is the opportunity. And that's just how you have to look at it. I can't think of another way to live, honestly.
I think that's well said. That you're absolutely right. I'm going to bring it less philosophical with a question on how can students. So a lot of students feel a little bit hesitant to reach out to a mentor, feeling that they don't have anything to offer to the mentor. It's that it is, as you said, a one-way relationship when you know that it's a two-way, and so I think students are a little hesitant sometimes to say, well, what do I really have to offer? I don't have that life experience. So maybe if you can share with us what this young woman who reached out to you is giving to you, because I know she is, and that anyone you've worked with has given back, and lots of relationships they're both two-way.
Sure. I mean, so in the 3 weeks that we've been doing these weekly meetings, I've learned that what I am practicing at work matches what the next generation is learning at work, which is great, right? Because that means that everything is aligned, and that we're doing things based on best practices, because this is what the next generation is learning to do as best practices, and it's a wonderful synergy. I'm learning that she's asking questions that I wasn't expecting, and I love that, because that means that she's thinking outside the box, so to speak, and she's looking at what I'm talking about and finding new angles to it. Because look, there's no new ideas, there's no new what I'm doing. I'm doing good work, don't get me wrong, but what I'm doing is always able to be improved. And I think that hearing her say, well, how about this? Well, why do you do it this way? And I don't really understand what's this dynamic. Like, she asked a question this morning about what's the role of an ad agency working with you, and why'd you set it up this way? And look, we could go through our entire working careers and just be on autopilot and do things the way we've always been doing them, because it's the way we've always been doing them. And it takes a disruptor, I think, to say, time out. Why are we doing it that way? And what can we do to improve? I think that what we've seen in the last 3 months is the organizations that were agile, but more importantly asked, what can we do differently, are the ones that succeeded. I'm very proud of Wheeler. We're 96% telehealth and telemedicine right now. That's a tremendous switch in thinking, and it took an incredible amount of work by an incredible amount of amazing people to think, how can we transform a service delivery system in the time of a pandemic to provide care in a different way? If you had talked to me in January and said, okay, we're all going to be working remote for 3 months in America and the world, and we're going to have to provide this by telehealth, and like, what are you talking about? No, that isn't the way it's going to work. That agility, that ability to be flexible, semper gumby, always flexible. I mean, you've got to have that in your mindset, because the world's going to throw you curveballs, and you got to deal with them.
I like that, semper gumby.
It's on my desk at work. I wish I had it cut out here, but it's literally semper gumby, always flexible. You got to be.
I like that. So we have some similar questions, and I think I'll just read them verbatim, and maybe we can help. I'm not sure there is an answer, but one person says, what can I do to find my true gifts and talents when I've spent most of my life under an authoritative figure who suppressed my self-exploration? So, I mean, I don't know how you're I don't know how you're going to answer that, but and folks, I'll just read a few of them, and sort of you can think about that one, and because they're all kind of related, and I think it all boils down to the way people are wondering, well, how do I find that one person who's going to help me? And I don't think there's an easy answer. I don't think
Yeah.
that there's a secret sauce to find the right mentor. So I think it's a conversations, right? So let me give
No,
me.
yeah, but let me touch on that one for a second, because
Okay.
I think it's close to what I hear from a lot of students when I meet them. I'll invariably say, well, what's your major? Well, I'm finance. Well, why are you a finance major? And I think I've used finance as an example twice. I don't mean to pick on finance majors. Why are you Well, because my dad is, or my mom is. Okay. Well, why are you a pharmacy major? Well, my mom's a pharmacist. Well, why are you in marketing? Well, because you're a parent. I'm a parent. I've got two kids. I love them both, and I want them both to find their own way in the world. And I don't really care if it's what I do. I would kind of hope they're not doing it for the sake of doing it. And your self-expression, what excites you in the morning, is what you want to be steering for in that passion part of that Venn diagram, right? Now, you could also make an argument that most people don't end up really working in their passion. Their passion is bicycling, okay, and they work at an insurance company, right, or whatever. So I guess there's two approaches you can take. One is you try to find that ideal job. That's that Venn diagram center of passion and opportunity and skill. And then there's the other side that says, yeah, my passion is rock climbing or art or whatever, and I can't find a job in that, so I'm just going to work in this job to pay for that on the weekends. And that's completely appropriate. I'm an astronomy nut. I do a lot of astronomy. I'm not an astronomer by profession. My profession pays for my telescopes, and that's okay. Um, but to find your own self-identity, when you wake up in the morning, what are you most excited about doing in the day? And that's going to be your passion, and that's going to change over time. My passion at one point in my life was politics. Now it's astronomy, it's reading. I have like 14 different passions. And I think finding those passions is key to happiness. And in terms of the authoritarian mandating on you, I don't want to give personal advice, but you got to be yourself, and you've got to be able to wake up in the morning and move forward in life with purpose and passion and a commitment to being a better tomorrow. So
That's a good answer. I think a couple people are asking about sort of self-discipline in terms of looking at things in the ways that you're describing, how to almost catch yourself when to flip that failure into an opportunity, and how do you catch yourself and sort of self-regulate and not look at things as failure, and enforce good habits is a phrase that one person used to embrace that failure.
yeah. So I can only answer for me, because I think everyone has different keys to that kingdom and different roads to get there. I will tell you that I like to think of myself as a lifelong learner, and I think reading and knowledge and mental flexibility in what you read is very important. I'll give you an example right now that I'm dealing with, and I think a lot of our country is dealing with. A colleague of mine who used to work together actually at UConn posted on LinkedIn. He's African American. He posted a book that he recommended to all of his white colleagues. It's called White Fragility, and he said, this is a book that I recommend to everyone to read. And I wrote to him. I said, it's funny, because I was on my Kindle the night before, and it actually came up as books related to the times we're in, kind of thing. And I said, I'm interested in this book. First of all, the headline is fantastic, right? And I said, I'm thinking about reading it. Could we read it together? And he said, absolutely, let's read it. And now we have a group of like 8 of us who are going to be reading it together. And that's not a book that I probably would have chosen to read 8 months ago. All right. And that's my fault. That's my fault. Read a lot of different things. Learn a lot of different things. Find, people are endlessly fascinating. If you're in the store, even just, and this is a stupid example, but if you're in the store, instead of just going through the checkout line, ask the cashier how their day is, because you're going to hear so much stuff you never planned to hear beyond just the throwaway, how's your day? always be growing, always be learning. There's no new ideas. You don't have a market captured on the good ideas in life. You can learn from every single person you encounter in your day, every single one. And don't get into, the mindset that this is who I am. Read and learn a lot, and you're going to find angles for yourself that you didn't even know existed. Politically, and I don't want to get into politics, but politically, I've meandered my whole life, in a million different buckets and categories. I'm not even sure what I am, to be honest with you. And challenge your beliefs. Like, what you think you know, you probably don't. Unless you really can explain it from the other perspective, the other side, you don't understand it, And you can only learn by reading and taking in knowledge from other people, whether it's in a book or a conversation or an interaction or what have you. Never stop learning.
That's absolutely right. I think you said it much earlier about, being analytical, look at things and think about them. I can't read, you phrased it much better, but the way you phrased it in the beginning was, don't just take information. I think, was it when you were talking about John Breen, maybe? I think was question it, question everything. When your mom said you love it, right?
Yeah.
You check your sources and challenge things, and I think that's great advice. We are running out of time. We did have one closing question that I'll address. There may be some others. I apologize if we didn't get to your question, but John has said that he's available. If you are looking to talk to him, you can follow up with him. He's in the Husky Mentor Network, etc. But that aside, we do have someone looking for your crystal ball skills and asking you what type of jobs you think are going to open up after COVID-19.
Boy. So I think I have a long-term and a short-term question or answer to that. This has changed the way that we work and that we operate, and certainly looking for and it's revealed enormous chasms, right? Enormous chasms, like chasms across our society on every possible line, and some really big ones. I think looking for opportunity in the healthcare and public health space, I think would be really good. Like, where is healthcare going to go with this? We've seen how it's reacted. We've seen how we've handled this pandemic. This will not be the last pandemic of our life. It hasn't really even been the first pandemic of our life. If you're someone my age, there were pandemics in the 60s and 70s even, and I think that we just have been ignoring them. So healthcare space, I think, work HR, I think, is going to provide a lot of different areas for growth. People are working remote. What does that mean? What does the future of the workforce look like? I think those are good business questions to ask. The one that scares me, it's more of a long-term one, is the role of AI in a workforce. I think that anyone who does repetitive cognitive tasks, and I'm one of them, I think has to really seriously look at how they're going to interact with AI in 10 years, because it's going to happen, and we can already see it happening. Where's your career space going to be when we're working side by side with computers that are making decisions on a semi-intelligent bit? This is really esoteric, and I'm very sorry to go off. They're not asking about where I am in 10 years. They're talking about now. But I do think that HR, healthcare space, and I think there's going to be a lot of areas for growth in that, and honestly, social justice and solving. And I talked about companies. I talked about Microsoft and everything, but we got a lot of problems, and we need energetic, passionate, intelligent voices to speak up and help us shape the future. Because to be honest with you, we've kind of done a pretty bad job of it, and we need the class of 2020 and students to sort of help us shape a better tomorrow, because we haven't done as much as we could have done. It's pretty clear and evident. So we need you. As I said in the piece, we need you.
We do. And what a great closing note. So I want to thank you, John, for your time. That was great. Some nice positivity, some great advice. As you said, we urge students and alums to reach out. John has said he's willing and certainly able to help and just have a conversation. Don't ask them for a job. That's not how we start conversations, but I bet you can do a little bit of introspection with him. So as mentioned, this webinar, and I know in the chat section somebody mentioned they jumped in late. Don't worry, we're going to send you a recording of this. So you should get that in your email within 48 hours. In addition to that, we post the recording on our website soon, probably give it a couple of days, but on UConn, career.uconn.edu. So I appreciate everyone's attention and all the questions. They were great, and John, you handled everything very nimbly, so we appreciate that as well. I just want to mention next week will be Diane Cavuto, and Diane will talk about how she had a very successful career as an engineer, a UConn engineering alum, and in the aerospace industry. And she decided to take some time off to enjoy her family. The timing of that was right before COVID, so or a little bit before that, and was planning to come back right before COVID. So she will talk a little bit about being a very experienced professional who found herself in the job search in the middle of a pandemic, and her trials and tribulations. So that should be interesting as well. So again, I want to thank John and everybody for attending today, and I look forward to seeing everybody again next week. Thanks again.
Thanks for having me. Bleed blue.
Take care.